In this Warframe guide, I'm gonna show you how to get tons of platinum completely for free, even as a brand new player. In fact, I've prepared over 20 different platinum farming methods, going from very simple and beginner-friendly all the way to highly optimized, making hundreds of platinum per day, so you can get that ka-ching for your bling. God, was that cringe. Anyway, big shoutouts to all our generous inside traders, and now, let's make some money, shall we? First of all, for completion's sake, yes, you could also go and buy platinum for real money. Just go to the Warframe website and then you see how much it costs in your region. If you have some money to spare and want to support the game, then I just want to mention it is completely fair to do so. However, I would recommend to wait with your purchase until you get either a platinum discount or a bonus platinum coupon as a login reward. If you're a PC player, then occasionally as login reward, you're gonna get one of those platinum discounts, which will then lower the real money price for your next platinum purchase within the next 48 hours. As for the console players, here it's a bit different because the prices are fixed, but instead of a discount code, you get a bonus platinum coupon on login. This one keeps the sale prices the same, but you get additional bonus platinum on top, which is also very nice. My personal recommendation is, if you want to buy, then only do so if you either have a 50% discount on PC or a 100% bonus platinum coupon on console. Just one last secret little tip that I figured out over the years. There is no official confirmation for this being actually the thing, but to me it seems if you don't log into the game for a couple of days in a row and then come back, it kind of looks like it's more likely that your login reward in this case will be a platinum code, so try that out for yourself if you're aiming for one. But yeah, so much for the real money purchases. Of course though, you didn't come to the video for that. Instead, you want to know how to farm platinum for free in Warframe, which is exactly what we're going to talk about for the rest of the video. And farming platinum in Warframe always means farming certain items in Warframe to then sell to other players for platinum and getting that for yourself in this way. So, because this video is not only for veterans but also for beginners, I quickly want to go over trading in general before we jump into the platforming methods, just so that the new players among you are not left behind. However, I'm gonna keep it very brief and surface level. If you want me to make a dedicated trading guide, then tell me in the comments down below and maybe I can do that in the future. For everyone who already knows how to trade, there are chapters down below so you can just skip ahead. In order to be able to trade with other players in Warframe, you first have to be Mastery Rank 2. This though shouldn't be all too difficult, most players reach that on their second day of playing. Up next, you have to enable two-factor authentication on your Warframe account, which you can do by going to the Warframe website, log in there, go to your account settings and set it up. Once you've met those two requirements, you're free to trade in Warframe, with the next question being, how do I actually do that? See, first of all, there are two locations in the game where you can trade. Those being either your clan dojo that has a trading post in it, or the other option would be Maru's Bazaar on Mars, where a lot of players can just hang out and showcase their offers. First off, Maru's Bazaar is an option for newer players that don't have a clan just yet, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it can get very convoluted very fast. My personal recommendation is try to get into a clan as soon as you can, or if you're a bit shy, you can also open your own personal clan and trade in that. So, now that you know where you can trade, let's next talk about how to find your trading partner, and there are also two main options for this. Either you could open the trading chat in-game, where a ton of players are constantly spamming which items they're selling or buying and for how much platinum. However, this is a place for Warframe experts. If you are a new player, please do not go there because you're gonna make bad deals. Sales are usually overpriced, offers are too low, and if you don't exactly know the market, you're gonna get ripped off. Instead, as an orderly fashion businessman, you would go to the website warframe.market. This one is not official, but it is a very well-going fan site. Basically, it works the same way as an auction house in most MMOs, where for every tradable item in the game, there is a list of people who are selling it and for how much. This way, you can always ensure that you get the best price, and of course, if you want to sell stuff yourself in the game, then you gotta sign up there, link your Warframe market to your Warframe account. The website gives you a step-by-step explanation on how to do that, and now you can put your own offers on the side for everybody to see if they want to purchase from you. Now, one more honorable mention would be another external app called LucraFrame. This is also a fan-made project that has tons of very valuable overlays that can give you background data on how much a certain item is worth and all of that in the game. However, I do not want to publicly endorse it because while to my knowledge nobody has ever faced any consequences for using it, the Warframe terms of service are a bit wishy-washy as to if these apps are allowed to be used or not, and it clearly states if you ever get banned for using third-party apps, you're not going to get your account back, which is why I personally never used a LucraFrame. And now the final little info before we jump into the platinum methods. You unfortunately can't trade infinite times per day. You only have a set number of trades that you can make per day. This number is equal to your mastery rank, so the higher your MR is, the more you can trade per day and make more platinum from it. And now, like the video to make some crazy bank in your favorite Space Ninja game. Cheers so much for your support, and now let's get into the platinum farming methods. Now, we're about to discuss a whole plethora of different platinum farming methods, and I tried my best to sort them from easy to do and beginner friendly to more optimized and endgame focused. However, a lot of this of course comes down to personal preference, and by no means is this list complete. There will be other platinum farms, every player has their own preferred methods. If you want to share your own preferred methods, then I'd be more than happy to hear it in the comments down below. Maybe we can even make a part 2 for this video out of it. Method number 1 is incredibly easy to pull off and every new player can do it, and that would be selling off Ayatan statues. See, once you make it to Mars, you will unlock the node Maru's Bazaar. In here, once per week, you can talk to Maru to go into an Ayatan treasure hunt mission. This mission is very short, I would say about 2 minutes, and at the end, you're guaranteed to be rewarded with an Ayatan statue. These are decorative elements for your orbiter that you can fill with the Ayatan stars that you find in containers throughout your missions, and then either you talk to Maru again to sell off your Ayatan statues for Endo, or instead, you could also sell your statues to other players for a bit of platinum. Of course, the different types of statues make different prices, somewhere between 5 to 15 per statue, and if I'm being completely fair, I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that if you are a brand new player, because the endo that those statues are worth is usually more important in the early game than the little bit of platinum that you can get out of it. But hey, that's my own opinion. Warframe is a sandbox game, so everybody is free to play however they like, and if you really need that extra bit of platinum for, let's say, another inventory slot or something, then I would say there's nothing wrong with selling off 1 or 2 statues to make it happen. The next method I want to talk about really surprised me because I was actually shocked to see how well this thing still works, and that has to do with the Nightwave. See, in your orbiter on the side here, you have this little radio which gives you access to the Nightwave. That is sort of a free battle pass that every player has access to, where you can do daily and weekly missions to level it up and gain a special currency called Nightwave credits. Those Nightwave credits can be spent in the adjacent Nightwave shop right here, which has a rotating inventory with different things every week. Now, the cool thing here is that even as a very early game player, you're usually able to complete enough of these daily and weekly missions to level up your Nightwave quite a bit to gain a decent bit of Nightwave credits. And what you're gonna do to turn those Nightwave credits into cold hard cash is you look into the shop at all the different mods that are being sold, and then check on Warframe.market which of these mods here, especially the aura mods, goes for the most platinum. However, instead of buying the highest selling mod and then selling it off on Warframe.market, what you're going to do instead is you put a sales offer of that mod on Warframe.market before you even buy it from the Nightwave, and maybe if there are multiple mods that go for a decent price, you can put offers for all of these mods on Warframe.market, and then only at the point where somebody messages you that they actually want to buy that mod from you, only then will you go and actually buy it from the Nightwave. This way, you can have multiple sales offers for different mods out there without even having to own a single one of them, and you can still serve all your customers no problem. Just please, for the love of the Lotus, make sure that as soon as you run out of Nightwave credits, as soon as you can't sell any of these mods anymore, please take down all the offers, because there's nothing more annoying than texting somebody to buy something just to hear that, oopsie, I don't even have it anymore. So please, be a responsible salesman. As for how much platinum you can expect, depending on which aura mods are being sold there, you can earn up to 15 platinum per mod, which is actually a whole lot, especially in the early game, and also the reason why I would never recommend buying Orokin catalysts and reactors for Nightwave credits directly, because they're pretty expensive at 75 Nightwave credits. Instead, do what we just said and buy the aura mods to sell them, because then you can use that platinum to buy Orokin catalysts and reactors from the market, which is mathematically much more efficient per Nightwave credit than buying them directly from the Nightwave shop. Just a little tip on the side here. Now, you might be thinking that kinda doesn't make sense to sell off those mods while they are actively in the rotation. You should rather bulk buy them and then sell them when they're not available to score a higher price. And yes, technically that is true. However, even if they're unavailable, they usually only sell for a couple platinum more a piece. But I think the convenience of selling whatever is in stock so that you can list them all on Warframe Market, I think that convenience is worth it. However, of course, before you blindly follow my advice, go to Warframe Market and check for yourself if anything of what I've said has changed in the meantime. Now, the next point is gonna be a big one for early game players as well as mid and late game ones, and that is relics. There is a whole bunch of stuff that you can do with them. First of all, if you really need a quick buck, you can sell relics themselves. Definitely won't make you rich, and I wouldn't recommend it, but it is technically possible. Next, if you're more of a newer or just casual player, one thing you can always do is take all those relics that you've stocked up and just randomly crack them open. Ideally, of course, you want to do that in a Fisher mission type that is quick and easy, like for example Capture, and very important, never run those missions solo, always in a full squad, because if you do it in a full squad, then you will have 4 different options to pick from as an item at the end of the mission, meaning a higher chance of getting more valuable things to be sold for more platinum. Now, in general, after you've opened a lot of relics, take a look at which types of prime parts you have, and then you can do one of 3 things with them. Number 1 is just keep them for yourself. I know a lot of veteran players recommend new players to never sell off any prime items because at some point you want to craft that specific thing and then you will be happy to have it. But again, everybody can play Warframe the way they want, and I personally think selling off a prime part for something that you don't even want to craft within the next 100 hours anyway might be a good idea to cash in some platinum and get more slots or whatever for it. Which would then also neatly lead us to point 2, that is, look up on Warframe Market for how much those items that you have sell, and just set them up on Warframe Market to be sold and make your platinum this way. And then finally, the third option would be, instead of selling them off for platinum, you go to a relay and turn those prime items into ducats. These ducats then can be used once every 2 weeks when the Void Trader Borrow-Keteer comes to the game to buy exclusive items from him, like for example primed mods, which are always very much sought after. They are worth quite a bit of platinum. However, the worst thing you can do is buy them from Borrow and then sell them off for platinum right away, as the purchase price of these items is at its lowest whenever Borrow himself is in town and sells them, of course. So what you want to do instead is pick those primed mods that are generally most sought after. You can, for example, check the historic trade volume for those mods on Warframe.market to see which sell well and which don't. And then take your ducats to buy a couple of copies of those specific mods, wait for a couple of weeks for the sales price to increase again, and then you can sell them off for a profit. While this can definitely net you a decent sum of platinum, it also should be noted that this is not your instant platinum cheat code. You do need to wait for the price to go up, so it's more like a long-term investment rather than instant gratification. Now, as a rule of thumb, what I would do here is, if you have prime items that are relatively rare and therefore higher in value, then I would rather sell it off for platinum. However, if the things you have are pretty worthless and only sell for 1 or 2 at a time, then I would recommend rather turning them into ducats and then using those ducats later on. Now, so much for the relics. Up next, let's talk about let's call it relic adjacent resource, and that would be Aya. See, Aya is kinda sorta like a relic joker. What you can do with this resource is go to Maru's Bazaar and then further in the back talk to Varzia Dax, where you can exchange the Aya for specific relics that contain the currently unvaulted Warframes. Those sets usually sell for somewhat higher prices, and the fact that you can turn the Aya into the specific relics you need for those sets directly makes it a much more efficient farm. Now, the question is, where do you get Aya? And the by far best option here are bounties in the open worlds. The higher the bounty level, the higher the drop chance. Besides the open world bounties, of course, there are tons of other ways where you can get Aya, but it is generally agreed upon that open world bounties are the way to go here. Now, the next point on our list is something that I personally absolutely hate, and that is hunting animals in the open worlds. Now, as you probably know, in the open worlds, you can acquire a tranq rifle to capture the wildlife there. For that, you will be rewarded with specific tags of the animal that you captured, and those tags then can be exchanged with the wildlife preservation expert of the representative region, that being Sun in the Necrolisc, Master Tisane, whose name I probably mispronounced very hard, in the Plains of Eidolon, or the business in Fortuna. Now, why would you do that? Because from those characters, you can get mods for those tags that you can then sell for a decent price on Warframe.market. At this point, if you want to know all the details about hunting, then big shout out to Developing Cat. She made a very nice and comprehensive guide on how exactly that works, which is where I also got the next tip for you, and that is to actually go and do the Fortuna hunting, because from Fortuna you can get the mod Burning Claws, which is not only very sought after, but it also only needs the tags from one specific animal, that being the Stover, making it much easier to come by. However, this is not all. Besides the tags, you of course also gain a lot of open world reputation by hunting those animals. And this Syndicate standing then can neatly also be turned into platinum, because the same wildlife conservation experts also sell the very important bond mods for your companion in exchange for 20,000 standing each. Those bond mods usually go for around 15 platinum apiece. It's a double farm at the same time, and you can make hundreds of platinum this way with relative ease. The next point on our list is something that I originally didn't even want to include because I thought it wasn't really all that efficient. But then I talked to my friend Salmonator, who streams over on Twitch, and he really opened my eyes to the potential of this. What I'm talking about is vault runs. See, some of the most important mods in the entirety of Warframe, the stuff that you will find on pretty much every build, are corrupted mods. These golden mods that have a positive and a negative status at the same time, something like Blind Rage for example. All these corrupted mods can be acquired by running Deimos missions, not the open world, but the star chart nodes, where my personal preference for farming them would be the capture mission here. The special thing about these missions is that in the Orokin Derelict tile set where they take place, you have a guaranteed Orokin vault spawn. This is a special room with a very fancy looking door, you can see it in the background right here, and you can unlock this door with 1 out of 4 dragon keys. These dragon keys come from the Orokin lab in your clan's dojo, and when you unlock the door, you can go into the Orokin vault, grab an item, and that then will be one random corrupted mod that you get at the end of the mission. In this gameplay demo right here, it was overextended. Now, I don't want to get all too much into the detail on how to optimize those vault runs. Long story short, ideally do it with 4 players, everybody should have a fast Warframe so you can search the tile set quicker, but Sam showed me that he did thousands of those vault runs and he compiled this list right here, stating for roughly how much platinum he usually sells off those corrupted mods. And especially if you manage to run those missions in a quick team, then you can really make a good buck with it. Thanks Sam for pointing that out. By the way, if you haven't already, make sure to follow him on Twitch. Link in the cards if YouTube lets me link to an external website. If not, in the description down below. And speaking of options, let's next talk about one of the, in my opinion, greatest overall platinum farms in the game, because you don't actively need to do anything. It just happens passively on the side, super convenient, and you can make a decent buck. What I'm talking about are syndicate mods. As you are surely aware, there are 6 base syndicates that you can pledge your allegiance to in your orbiter. And once you've reached the max rank with those syndicates, which admittedly takes a little bit of time, so it's more for the mid-game player, not for the earliest of starters, once you're max rank with them, you gain access to a lot of valuable goods that you can exchange your syndicate standing for. These would be, for example, syndicate-specific weapons like the Vake or Heck from Steel Meridian, and a whole bunch of Warframe augment mods and syndicate mods in general. Now, very important thing here. Nowadays, most of those weapons aren't really that much sought after anymore and they don't score great prices, which is why it's usually not recommended to sell those weapons. Instead, what you rather want to do is check out which mods your syndicate sells and see which sell for the highest platinum. This will not vary all that much. Usually those syndicate mods go for around about 15 platinum apiece, which is nice. And the good thing is, they always sell in very high quantities because you can't have good standing with every syndicate at the same time. So you're basically forced to trade with other players for the mods from those syndicates that you don't have a good reputation with. And naturally, the best thing is, you don't even need to actively farm the reputation for the syndicates. All you need to do is pledge your allegiance to them, and then a portion of your experience that you gain by simply playing your day-to-day missions is automatically gonna go towards the reputation for that syndicate. Finally, all you gotta do is sell your syndicate mods and then profit. Also here, you can theoretically list every single one of your syndicate mods, and only once you get contacted by a buyer will you actually purchase this specific mod from your syndicate and then sell it off. Now, the next method can make you a ton of platinum very fast, however, you need to be quick. What I'm talking about are new Prime releases. See, every 3 months or so, Warframe releases a brand new Prime Warframe with their respective Prime weapons. Your goal here is to sell as many sets of the new Prime items as possible on the very first day, ideally in the very first hours after release, as this is where the price is ridiculously high and you can make hundreds and hundreds of platinum in one day. Here's how you do that most efficiently. First off, when you start farming for the new Prime Relics the moment the frame releases, you're already too late. Instead, what you want to do is fill up the reputation for your syndicates plus for the open world syndicates at the same time, and then if you've already unlocked Steel Path, also farm 375 Steel Essence. Now, once the new Prime Access releases, the first thing you gotta do is spend all of that syndicate reputation plus the Steel Essence on relic packs, as those relic packs can contain the relics for the new Prime Warframe and their weapons. This way, if you pre-farm all of this, you will be able to get a lot of these Prime items right off the bat, and then all you need to do is crack open the relics. Ideally, of course, in a dedicated squad that you find via matchmaking, where everybody is just running these new relics. Shouldn't be all too difficult to find, as usually your recruit chat goes absolutely crazy on the day of a new Prime release. Now, this way you can definitely make a good buck. Even if you don't get a full set, just selling off the individual part in the first few hours will already be quite profitable. However, if the only grass touching you ever do is in the grass touching simulator, then what you could also do is pre-farm syndicate medallions every single day, and then use all of these syndicate medallions on the day of the Prime release to fill up your syndicate standing to be able to purchase even more relic packs than you would get initially. This is possible because while yes, you have a daily cap on how much reputation you can gain with a syndicate, the reputation gained through syndicate medallions does not count for this, which is exactly the point here. Spend all of the pre-farmed medallions to get even more relic packs, and therefore more of the new Prime frame. Would I recommend doing that? No, because it is incredibly tedious and annoying to having to do that 24/7, but I'm just saying, it can be crazy profitable. The next method on our list is something that most players find very tedious and bothersome, but that is exactly the reason why you can use this to profit, and that is playing the mirror defense mission Tiana Pass on Mars. Now, our goal with this mission is to farm 5 different arcanes which we can then sell off. Those being Arcane Double Back, Arcane Steadfast, Primary Plated Round, Secondary Encumber, or Secondary Kinship. These arcanes can all drop from the mission. However, that's not the only way. You can also take the Belric and Rania crystal fragments that you gain as a reward from playing this mission, talk to Otak, and then turn those fragments into those arcanes as well. In order to get the most out of it, of course you want to do the mission in Steel Path, that nets you more rewards, and because most players don't like to play this, the sales prices for those arcanes are pretty respectable. Just as an example, a max rank secondary encumber currently goes for around about 200 platinum, which is definitely nothing to scoff at. Up next, we have a relatively convenient, relatively mid to late game method, and that has to do with Requiem Relics. See, once you finish the War Within quest, you have access to the whole Kuva system. These Requiem Relics that we're talking about drop either from Kuva Siphon or Kuva Flood missions that will pop up on the map once you've completed the War Within. Alternatively though, you can also create a Kuva Lich and take out their Kuva Thralls, as those have a 5% drop chance of getting you one of those relics too. All in all, if you do some Lich hunting, then you'll get more than enough of those relics as a nice byproduct. Now, what exactly are we doing with those relics? See, all of them can contain different Requiem mods that are vitally important for Lich hunting. Because most players don't want to bother farming them themselves, those Requiem mods usually go for around about 10 platinum, with the one exception being the one called Ool, because this is kind of sort of a joker, this is worth 20 platinum. But what I'm trying to say here is, if you farm those Requiem relics and crack them open, you're going to get a ton of those Requiem mods out of them, and if you don't want to do hardcore Lich farming yourself, then you can sell them off for a neat bit of cash. Also here, just like with normal relics, do them in a group to increase the chance of actually getting what you want out of the relics. And now that we're already talking about all the Kuva business, the next method I want to mention goes in the same direction, and it can be insanely profitable, making you multiple hundreds of platinum per trade. That is, selling Kuva Liches themselves. See, if you generate a Kuva Lich, then they will of course have the signature weapon with which you created them, plus the elemental damage bonus, depending on which Warframe you created them with. By the way, if you need to know more about Kuva Liches, I already have a full guide on that. However, what I'm trying to say here is, if you get lucky and the elemental progenitor bonus percentage of that Kuva Lich is close to or even at 60%, which is the maximum, then instead of hunting down the Lich yourself, you can actually sell off your Kuva Lich for multiple hundreds of platinum. If we check out the Warframe market page for this, you can see the high prices that are being paid for the perfect Lich, and they get even higher if the Lich has a specifically funny name or ephemera or something else that other players might desire. Just one important thing to mention here, in order to be able to sell a Lich in the first place, you need to have a specific room in your clan's dojo that's called the Crimson Branch, because Kuva Lich trading, unlike all the other trading in the game, does not happen via the normal trade console. You do need the Crimson Branch console to do that. The next thing I want to talk about is something that can also be very profitable, and that would be selling Endo. Now, we all know Endo, right? The resource that we need to max out all those hundreds and thousands of mods, but you might be wondering, how can you sell this because Endo is not tradable? Well, what I'm referring to here is taking rank 0 mods, filling them up to their maximum with Endo, and then selling them as max rank mods for a much higher price. For example, for a rank 10 gold mod, you will have to pay around about 30,000 Endo to max it out, but therefore the maxed out mod will roundabout be 80 platinum more valuable than the rank 0 one. Of course, this always depends on which specific mod you're talking about, so definitely do your research first on which mod it is that you want to sell for this. But the main takeaway here is, if you have a lot of Endo, then you can turn this into big chunks of platinum. Now, if you're wondering how to farm as much Endo as quickly as possible for this, then I do already have a admittedly relatively old Endo farming guide. I do want to make a new updated one soon, so leave a sub for the channel if you don't want to miss that, maybe. But in 2025, with the most optimized Endo farm I can think of, you could net around 3,000-ish Endo per minute if you're doing everything perfectly, meaning we're talking about an absolutely insane platinum potential here. Now, the next method on our list is probably one of the best and most convenient ones out there because it doesn't only kill 2, but actually 3 birds in 1 stone. And that would be arbitrations. Now, arbitrations are one of the best and most profitable game modes in the entirety of Warframe. You first unlock them by completing the Ares Junction, so it's relatively mid-game, you don't have to complete every single mission node anymore as it was before, and they can just give you so many things. First of all, arbitrations give you tons and tons of Endo. They're in fact one of the best Endo farming methods in the game, and as we just saw, selling Endo is worth quite a decent bit of platinum, so that is very convenient. Secondly, remember how at the beginning of the video I said you can do your weekly Ayatan treasure hunt with Maru to gain 1 Ayatan statue per week that you can then sell off for a little bit of platinum? Well, scrap that, because as soon as you unlock arbitrations, you will be showered in Ayatan statues, as those are also pretty darn common. You get a lot of them by playing arbitrations, and then you can either keep them for yourself, sell them off for platinum, or turn them into Endo to then turn that Endo into platinum. But as if that's not enough, there are also a bunch of arcanes that you can get as a drop. Also here, either keep them for yourself or sell them off for platinum. There are specific arbitration mods like adaptation and combat discipline, for example. They're not that valuable, I wouldn't necessarily want to farm for them specifically. However, the main reason we're even doing arbitrations in the first place is none of the aforementioned, that's just your cherry on top. The reason we do arbitrations is to farm Vitus Essence. You get those either from the arbitration drones that fly around in the mission as a drop, or as rewards from the missions themselves, and with this Vitus Essence, you can go to any relay, enter the room of the Arbiters of Hexes, and then they have a lot of different mods that you could purchase with this Vitus Essence. First and foremost here, my recommendation on what to sell would be the galvanized mods, as they sell for around about 10 platinum a piece, and especially if you try to do the arbitrations a bit more optimized, try to speedrun them a bit more, that you can make hundreds of platinum just from the galvanized mods in absolutely no time. Next, I want to talk about Archon mods, because you can make quite a decent buck with it, which really surprised me. See, once you finish the new war quest, you will have access to a weekly activity called the Weekly Call mission. In this mission, you play as Brother Call, and for each run there are a bunch of bonus objectives that you can fulfill to gain a resource called Stock. If you complete all objectives, you will get 105 stock, plus during the mission there will also be stock pickups that can give you a maximum of 10 more. Why do you need this stock? Because you can take this resource to Chipper, who's standing right next to Call in the little drifters camp, and then from the stock you can buy Archon mods for 40 stock each. Every Archon mod goes for between 20 and 25 platinum, so just by doing your weekly call mission, which shouldn't take longer than 45 minutes, you can expect to earn 50 to 75 platinum just from these Archon mods. The next point on our list is something that is probably not the most efficient or optimized platinum farm, but it is very convenient, it doesn't need a specific setup, and you can basically do it on a side while you're watching something on Netflix. And that would be the Conjunction Survival Mission Circulus on Lua. First of all, ideally you want to do this in Steel Path because that yields you more drops. As part of the reward rotation, you will get a ton of different stuff, for example, 2 weapons, the Seraphang and the Perigale, which are both completely tradable. They're not necessarily all that valuable, but given the fact that you're going to get a lot of them if you play this for long, this is a nice little side effect. In addition, you can also get arcane drops, which you can then sell again, and during this mission, you will also gain a resource called Lua Thrax Plasm, which you get as a mission reward every rotation, but this mission will also spawn Lua Thrax enemies, who themselves can drop more of this resource. By the way, if you want to get as much as possible, you do want to run this in a full squad, because more players means more Thrax units spawning, means more Lua Thrax Plasm for everybody. Now, I hear you say, what do I want to even do with the Lua Thrax Plasm? Very simple, go to the Zeraman 10-0 and talk to Archimedian Yonta, where you can then exchange all your Lua Thrax Plasm for the Mission Arcanes again to then sell them off. As I said, this is not the most efficient platinum farm, but it is very easily done on the side, doesn't need a specific team setup or even concentration on your part. But alright. Now we're gonna get a little bit more meta with our platinum acquisition, and that would be prime part flipping. Now, the premise of this is actually pretty simple. As you will see when you browse Warframe Market, selling off a complete primed set with the blueprint and all components all at once will net you more platinum than selling off all those parts individually, and this is exactly what we're trying to benefit off of. What we're aiming for here is find 1 or 2 primed items. Doesn't have to be a Warframe, can also be a weapon. The only important thing is that there is a decent bit of trade volume, so it shouldn't be any niche thing that barely gets sold. And then what you're trying to do is buy as many of the individual parts of these sets as you can for as little platinum as possible. You could, for example, spam the trade chat in-game and try to find somebody who sells these things off to you for a reduced price. Or, instead of going through the sales offers on Warframe.market, you could actually go and add a buy offer, type in a lower price, and hope that somebody will contact you to instantly sell off their stuff, and by doing this, you will acquire a decent stockpile of all the different parts for that set that you're farming, so that once you have a set complete, you can sell it off and make more money back than you spend for the sum of the parts. Just note though, this method is not necessarily something for trading beginners because you A, need a decent bit of platinum to even start, you need to buy the stuff after all, and secondly, you want to have a relatively high mastery rank, as that means you have more trades per day, so more opportunities to buy and sell. And then finally, I'm not going to give you any specific recommendations as to which prime item you should flip, because that constantly changes and always very strongly depends on what is currently vaulted and what not. Up next, we have probably the single most profitable game mode in the entirety of Warframe, and that being, of course, Steel Path Void Cascade. Now, I'm not going to give you a detailed breakdown of how this game mode works because I want to make a dedicated guide on just Void Cascade alone, but what it comes down to is, you start this on the Zeraman 10.0, ideally in its Steel Path version, and ideally, you want to have a mod drop chance booster, because the main reason you play this game mode is for all the Thrax enemies that will spawn in there. The longer you stay in, the more frequently they will spawn, and each and every one of those Thraxes can drop tons of different arcanes with a decent chance if you min-max it right. Those arcanes then can either be sold themselves for platinum, or what you could alternatively do is go to Lloyd in the Sanctum Anatomica and turn the arcanes that you don't want into Phosphor, which is a resource that you can use for a system called Arcane Dissolution, where you pay Phosphor for an arcane pack that gives you randomized arcanes from other arcane types. Now, which of these arcane packs here should you buy? In my personal opinion, going for the Duviri Arcane Pack or the Eidolon one will give you access to those arcanes that are selling for the highest price or just in the highest volume because they're all very strong and popular. So, long story short, you can play Void Cascade to get tons of those arcanes and then either sell them off directly or turn them into Phosphor for a chance of turning them into even more valuable ones. As I said before, I'm gonna make a dedicated Void Cascade guide. So if you don't want to miss that, day one, then you might want to consider maybe leaving the channel a sub. Welcome to the crew! And then finally, last but definitely not least, the single most profitable platinum farm in the entire game has always been and probably will always be, and that will be the Riven market. See, Rivens are all about RNG. If you get lucky, you might obtain a Riven for one of the most meta weapons like the Torrid Incarnon for example, and even god roll stats on it. There are players who will legitimately pay thousands of platinum for one of these perfectly rolled Rivens, and you can check it all out on Warframe.market because they also have a Riven auction house. However, the problem with this is that A, you need to get very lucky by obtaining a Riven for the right weapon in the first place, and then also pray for good rolls. It's pure RNG, and even if you have the perfect weapon with the perfect rolls, it might take weeks or months to find somebody to actually want to pay thousands of platinum for that Riven. If you ask me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the Riven market. I haven't ever been Riven trading, but I know there are players out there who do nothing else and make tens of thousands of platinum just by re-rolling and selling those god roll Rivens. And now click this video next to learn everything you need to know about Rivens. Another massive shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Cell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Nas Linux Gaming, Turtle Pier, Undercanio 2, Skylar Bowser, Mihawky, Phil the Meme, Socrates the Almighty Rat, Leo Morazaki, Shadow Lockhart, Antares, Patrasator, Boomia1, Mr. Games Plays, Zave, and all other generous channel members for your continuous inside trading. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good trades.